thanks everyone for joining. I know we have a big group today, but so we'll keep this super informal. If you have a question, interrupt. We'll have this be more conversational. It's not 500 people, right? So I'm Patrick Harrington. I am head of our AI and machine learning efforts at MetaRouter. And we are here today to talk about the first mile. And what does that mean in the context of customer born data, the journey, the compute, and then ultimately the activation and value realization associated with those data streams. So let's get into it. And please, I'm not a formal person. You got something? Raise your hand. Let's just get right into it. Okay. This is a weird time. We're coming up into 26. If we look back 4 or 5 years ago, everything with AI relative to today looks sci-fi, right? And the data associated with how customers are interacting with brands, with products, with retailers, with publishers is changing. And the composition of those surfaces are changing with the addition of new AI-centric modalities, ChatGPTs, Geminis of the world. And with this, it's introducing heterogeneity of different type of data that ultimately back-end systems need to normalize and make sense of it to preserve revenue associated with advertising efforts, the margin associated with such, and ultimately make sure that there's still growth anchored in a perspective on a go-forward basis. So data readiness is really the critical fuel of monetizing insights derived from data. And so it's really garbage in, garbage out, right? We want to make sure that data is prepared for computation. There's a lot of, call it parsing out garbage in a lot of machine learning and data science workflows. And so how do you basically try to minimize that step and focus with eyes on the prize of the actual value creation? And so what is this whole first mile moniker? The first mile is really where customer anchored data is born, whether it be you're on a website, looking at various items, you're adding to cart, you're searching, you are on an app, browsing around, you're in ChatGPT, exploring trips to Northern Italy. These are all data streams flying off in real time, anchored by identity, and ultimately get deposited downstream in more last mile of a terminus type mindset where that data accrues as system of record, in a CDP, in a data lake, whatever you want to call it, where it grows monotonically and machine learning, AI, et cetera, is used to mine that data and ultimately extract audience segments, fraud models, you name it. So the first mile is effectively the river is to the lake, right? If we view the last mile as the lake, the river is where MetaRouter plays ball. We're pushing, hopefully pristine, filtered water into the lake in real time, and the lake is really the basin of collection. So that's kind of the bookend of start of the journey, end of the journey of how to think of this first mile. So what does this mean when you go to consumers interacting with different websites, their apps, maybe their physical stores where they're buying for omni-channel retail, they're purchasing with a modern point of sale solution? What does it mean when there is more agentic commerce? On classical websites, a lot of the tags get blocked by ad blockers. Identity gets fragmented. Privacy and the jurisdiction of which data collection and use of data, rights of data, is increasingly becoming more heterogeneous and more of a consideration in your architecture. Chief privacy and compliance officers have a seat at the table. And so when you think of the first mile, it's really the opportunity to get things right, such that all boats float downstream. I think one thing to add for this group, it's a little nuanced here, but identity is really critical here. If I can take behavior attached to Patrick Harrington that may be viewed as multiple versions of independent people, and I can coalesce that to oneself, downstream machine learning is going to have more rich correlations to learn from, to do lookalike modeling, to build propensities off of. And so that identity fragmentation component is really critical, and where MetaRouter in the first mile brings that together. And so there are downstream nuance considerations here that sound nuanced but have direct impacts to a business's expected revenue associated with audiences being built off any CDP, moved into some sort of performance-driven revenue paradigm. So what does MetaRouter do in this first mile moniker relative to the last mile? This schematic effectively, you can imagine on the left, is any customer interaction with digital properties owned by the entity. It could be a major retailer, it could be a publisher, et cetera. MetaRouter's capabilities in the first-party context are effectively ingesting the stream of behavior across these surfaces, anchored with first-party identity. These identity handshakes reach over into anything from Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, all the usual suspects from an advertising standpoint. That handshake of identity is done behind the scenes asynchronously. Comes back as an identity graph, as this first mile enrichment. It can then gets passed down to the different data assets. Obviously, we're here with Treasure Data, who's a partner of ours, where that identity graph goes into the CDP, which can be then coalesced with other, call it other flows, anchored by different snippets of identity to form a canonical view of the individual. Maybe there's third-party data being joined, models being built, turned around back into advertising purposes. Other destinations include, obviously, the Facebooks of the world, the Pinterests of the world, et cetera, where the audiences are built and deployed into in real time. And so this view of first mile, last mile is really ultimately this single living picture of the customer. And living is really this fluid mid-flight version of where that data object is, where it goes, and the extensibility both on the customer service side, but also on the destination side. Having been on the other side of this coin, we all are familiar with consent being captured in the moment. Whether it be on a website, I'm allowing myself to be used for analytics purposes, but not advertising purposes. When you collect that in the moment, MetaRouter uses that signal and either suppresses where that object should or should not go, and ultimately helps filter downstream destinations. It's really hard once compliance and consent is captured and sitting there for hours or days to unbake that cake. In the moment when you can affect dynamically where that data goes or should not go, effectively minimizes the headaches and the toil associated with downstream compute, ETL, and just general risk assessment of the situation. And so MetaRouter captures that consent and really intelligently affects where it should or should not go. We have a lot of customers in the EU where GDPR is present. CCPA out in California is a consideration. And this type of data sovereignty considerations of the consumer are only becoming more of a consideration when architectures and infrastructures are built and where and what they can and cannot do. So by doing this in the moment, in real time, where data is born in that first mile, in a way it reduces the entropy of the technical challenge and allows a much more seamless downstream data set, we'll call it. Ripe for mining, ripe for insights being extracted and other analytic purposes. So one nuanced thing about MetaRouter, when I talked about these handshakes in the moment associated with your destinations of interest, whether it be Facebook, Google, Pinterest, Snapchat, you name it, where you now have an ID representation from your own side, the customer that MetaRouter is supporting, but also the destinations where eyeballs tend to go when they leave that domain. There's much often customers who are not logged in, right? We're all familiar with this. You're on the New York Times, you're on Condé Nast, you're on HomeDepot.com, Costco, you're not logged in, right? And so how do we offer expansions of coverage of identity associated with behavior such that we can stitch that back to a known individual and increase the coverage of effectively customers that you can communicate with? And so many of our campaigns that we help orchestrate involve match rates of identity to 30 and 40% higher off anonymous traffic. This is critical going to Q4 for many, stateside here, Q4-related holiday-based shopping patterns where there is such a spike of volume of behavior, logged in, logged out, where this expansion of coverage really does help campaign performance. And so you're able to be compliant in the moment, you're able to resolve that identity, and then ultimately, our partnership with Treasure Data pushes things down into our diamond record, where things are ready and primed for an on-ramp back into reality where the computation and intelligence has happened. So I mentioned the diamond record. Going back to the first mile, last mile, this is a continuous relationship. It's a synergy involving a continuous, living, breathing object of understanding of intent through computation, feeding more clean data anchored with identity, with on-ramps into different ecosystems across the internet. And the diamond record is the point of coalescing all of these identity variants overlaid with large-scale data processing to do anything for propensity modeling, you name it. So it's really the terminus of this identity-anchored data that gets coalesced together, and that represents the diamond record. So this is kind of the yin and yang of our partnership of the top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. You can think of it effectively being that reduction phase where everything is blended together. This river analogy into the lake, I think, is helpful for me. I talk to my parents, like, oh, you're going out to Vegas, you're giving a talk. What are you giving a talk on? And they're both lawyers, so I have to kind of massage what I say to a different audience. But effectively here, this AI interface level, our thesis is supporting our customers who are major public retailers, major publishers, brands who maintain a variety of different digital properties. We want to be agnostic to where that behavior happens, whether it be on your desktop web, your mobile app, chat modalities, and physical store sales. And the chat modality one is interesting right now. So a lot of folks may have seen the Wall Street Journal reporting on Walmart integrating with ChatGPT last week. For me, having worked at Walmart before, this was a really interesting read over a glass of wine, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what's going on here? But behind the scenes, the core handshake between a retailer and ChatGPT is something called the Agentic Commerce Protocol. It's co-built, it's open source framework between Stripe and OpenAI, and the visibility of behavior changes. We all agree that these chat modalities are not going away. They're growing monotonically in either referral traffic, but now behavior is starting to move into the domain, Walmart joining Etsy and Shopify. So the question is, how do we tap in and support our customers of this new behavior stream and normalize it to their existing investments that correspond to their existing revenue efforts, their existing margin, and be defensive and offensive at the same time. So the difference here versus, say, you're on Walmart.com or any other website, we support and ingest everything that's going on. With chat modalities and ACP, the retailer only has visibility to add to cart, edit to cart, and purchase. So things are changing. It does not have visibility into upstream of that. But MetaRouter is there to support this new nth+1 surface and normalize that behavior, the schema, into a format that can play well with downstream data assets, like Treasure Data. So this whole concept of, say, 15 years ago, big data, this and that, passive pipes, we're just moving bytes around, is really evolving into a customer data infrastructure that's self-improving and living. It affects the experience. It's dynamic. It's subjective. And that comes from capturing in the first mile an intelligent filtering of data that then feeds the computational unit downstream that turns around insights that can be used to enrich that behavior, affecting where it goes in the experience, off-site destinations, or suppression of what does not leave, what do I not need to deploy paid budget against in paid channels, and ultimately leads to this closed loop. In AI, reinforcement learning is kind of an expression where you're learning as you go. By closing the loop and having observability on cause and effect, you can now start learning patterns and policies that affect that experience in a desirable way as it pertains to the business. And so this living data system is really this continuous optimization against commercial intent. So when MetaRouter is there providing this first mile behavioral capture, customer data orchestration of what behavior is going on, where does it go, et cetera. Concrete example, I'm on some website in session, I'm viewing things, I'm adding to cart, maybe there's dwell time, I'm thinking about something. We observe that in real time and update our view of a continuous representation of intent, which gets passed downstream into a CDP like treasure data. Agents are able to analyze this new stream of data overlaid with other, call it attributes known about the individual, and next best actions, whether it be next best product or lookalike audiences being pushed to Facebook, is happening at that bottom of funnel, that last mile. So it's really the marriage of that first mile and the last mile where this becomes a reality of closing the loop, moving in real time, reacting in real time in a compliant, consented manner. And what we see when we work with our customers is ultimately where the rubber hits the road is improved return on ad spend, higher conversion rates, and deploying more budget towards folks who need that nudge, where that nudge is effective. And so it ends up being a more optimal allocation and leads to a better understanding of the individual in a holistic manner, which leads to downstream better machine learning models, data science models. You're effectively not duplicating rows, you're consolidating rows on identity that have richer correlation structure that leads to better performing models in the wild. So when we think of this first mile, last mile, this journey of data from the creation based upon behavior and interaction with any customer surface, from web, app, physical store, point of sale, and now agentic surfaces like ChatGPT through the Agentic Commerce protocol, we're able to provide a holistic view of behavior, meeting folks where the customers are, and normalizing behavior across different modalities and their corresponding schema into a common representation. So folks who've ever built models before and ever pulled their hair out trying to clean up data sets in some downstream database, some data lake, some CDP, it's ready to roll at the end of the day. That data is clean, it is ready for model development, whether that be rank 1 updates to different models, whether it be standing up a net new model. And so this flow of more pristine content into the downstream data asset allows for higher performing models and ultimately less false positives and other, call it undesirable characteristics associated with working in the domain of statistical models. So when we think of this diamond standard with MetaRouter, first mile, and treasure data, last mile, we have a really interesting holistic partnership because we're covering the entire customer journey of data associated with how end consumers interact with your business. And so end to end, it really does provide you the holistic capability to deploy any types of AI, machine learning, you name it, to drive better consumer engagement and subsequently better revenue and margin characteristics associated with what you're doing with that data. And so these are the companies that we support. These are our customers, some of our customers today that we support across a variety of retail media use cases where behavioral data engagement with different brands is critical for retailers to use and then drive incremental monetization with very lofty RMN goals. We have publishers, we have brands, multi-brand, we have like Lululemon, single brand, omni-channel, you name it. And these are very large public companies associated with how can we normalize the integration and that relationship with the consumer, move things and route in real time, consented, transform and shape that data, keen to kind of the Babelfish or Google Translate, mid-flight. Data is being translated for Facebook, separate from Pinterest, separate from your Databricks location. It's being translated mid-flight and also enriched, where machine learning models are invoked in that first mile that may lead to an audience segmentation score or brand propensity that then helps the downstream data assets do more of features being derived in the moment. So, for the large audience that we have today, thank you for joining. We do have this really interesting podcast, by the way, and I'm not like a podcast guy, but there's so much going on right now in industry and the adoption of how companies extend themselves into new modalities, where this First Mile podcast is really thought leadership, bringing in folks from across industry who've kind of seen this for a bit and can extrapolate where the puck is sliding. But ultimately, the goal here is, what can we do in the first mile? What does it mean as we extend into the world of AI becoming a disruptive new channel with different types of visibility characteristics relative to, say, the stuff that we've been interacting with for the past 20 years? And how are we there? How should brands and retailers position themselves and not have to blow up existing investments that have already been made that are mid-contract? How do we normalize that so they play well together? So I want to thank the Treasure Data folks for putting on a great conference. I hope everyone's had a great time. And it's a really holistic, nice end-to-end partnership in the life cycle of data. And so thanks everyone for joining. And any questions, commentary, anything? Thank you. Okay. Help me understand a little bit of the ultimate goal of those interactions with the physicians. Is it the goal to ultimately find them elsewhere on the internet? Is there a commercial outcome associated with some engagement? Help me understand that a little bit. Got it. So effectively what we would do is allow you to understand your traffic better. You would be able to find them, whether they're logged in, I'm not sure of the experience, or anonymous. You'd be able to speak to them when they leave your website to bring them back. You'd be able to find them elsewhere on the internet, Instagram, Google, TikTok, you name it. That's one. And then two, as you're ingesting that behavior in real time, you may have more dynamic content, personalization, capable in the moment of understanding what they're doing. Maybe some content that you would show. I mentioned next best action. Maybe there's another article to drive engagement. Maybe you're learning from the desired outcome as a function of behavior. Maybe there are offers to put forth in that experience. And so it really allows a more subjective, dynamic experience to optimize desired commercial outcomes while being able to then find them elsewhere when they leave. And so when we are deployed in like healthcare is a great HIPAA-related example. I don't know if that's applicable here, but MetaRouter is deployed in a customer's cloud environment. We don't operate it, it's not ours, so it's all in the first-party domain. So data governance leads, privacy compliance leads really like that because your data is not leaving. It is in your environment, right? And so for sensitive domains like healthcare, that's a major consideration. For financial services, that's another major consideration. But to be honest, coming up in 2026, it's a consideration of almost every single customer these days, even retail. And so to your example of how you would use it, it allows you to effectively have knobs and levers of optimizing that experience while it's mid-flight versus hours and days later. And so that real-time component associated with behavior-triggered targeting or suppression because they've already signed up or you already know them, they're anonymous, they're not logged in, but they truly are a customer already, or user, whatever the moniker is, or vernacular is, you're able to have more efficiency expansion characteristics. I mentioned return on ad spend. When you have some fixed media budget and you're trying to deploy that across paid channels, how can you be judicious and intelligent about how you are deploying that? The identity to the handshake to, say, Facebook, say Pinterest. Let's just say those are the two that you care about. That handshake happens in the moment. It then, in the context of this partnership, that ID graph that otherwise would be third party is now in the first party domain. It's passed downstream into your CDP, which may then be overlaid with additional attributes or different data sets. And that enrichment may lead to pushing an audience out back into, say, Facebook or Pinterest that has that expansion of lookalikes or attributes that are desirable to them, bring them back. But it can also be used to enrich in the moment when that data is mid-flight between first and last mile, when that experience is living, to enrich that experience using the assets, the machine learning models, et cetera, that have been trained on the data in mass, sitting in the lake, kind of going back to the river lake analogy. We're able to derive and affect effectively components of that river, maybe pulling trash out, kind of going with that analogy. So, anything else? Well, listen, folks, I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining and listening.